I'm going to take a slightly different approach to what I usually do. So rather than video it in steps and then try and explain it, I'm going to try and get the camera so I can video it and see if I can get the whole process. So first off, we need to get this servo out. So let's start with that one. See if I can pry that up. Right, and let's see if that's the same splines as what we've got on the new servos. Yep, so that's going to make life a lot easier. So yeah, the stock Hobao servos, what we got, HB5518 MG. So they are metal geared, but I'm pretty sure they're only 18 kilograms of torque on these. So we'll start with getting the servo screws out, and once we've got these out we can undo the receiver box and everything so we can get the cables out. Now I know on these cars you've got a servo retaining bracket that's just underneath. So I'm not sure what kind of nightmare it's going to be getting these back in. I'm not sure if we're going to have to take this whole plate out just to try and get us something that you can hold on to get the servo back in, because I don't think they'll slide enough. No. So I think we're going to have to take them out and then work out how to get the servo back in. There might be enough room to get my fingers under it. I think if I remember rightly on the Hobao, you've got to take the battery cover open to be able to get the receiver box lid off. I'm not sure if it latches onto this. It's been a while since I've opened this one. So that'll let us get to where his cables come in, and I think looking at this receiver, yeah, it's the FGR4S, so that's fine up to 8.4 volt, and we've got both his servo wires through there. So I'll now drop this servo on off as well. Let's just check the threads on these. Yeah, so it looks like you'd be fine to use the standard screws off the Hobao servos in the JX servos, so that'll save us some hassle. Now I think, purely just to make my own life easier, I think I'm going to take the air filter off and just take the top plate off so I can get to the bottom of the servos. I think it'll just be easier than trying to get my finger under this side and try and hold the servos down as I'm trying to screw them back in. I've got to do is try and stop these posts spinning, which is going to be easier said than done. Can't get my finger through to that one, or I might be able to if I do that. Yeah, that's it. Put these down in order we take them off, and then we know where they come from. Just be careful not to knock any dirt or anything down into carb. You don't want that getting in there. So if we now carefully remove this, and there's the little bits of plastic that you fasten your servo into. Now if I can untangle these, we can see which one is servos fasten into here. So you've got your steering in channel 1 and the throttle in channel 2, so we can get those out. And after trying many different brands of tools, I've finally bought myself a full set of MIP, and I don't think I'll ever regret doing that. But the only thing I do regret is not buying them before and wasting money on them on some of the cheaper ones that's not really lasted as long as they should. But they really do go very tightly into the Allen key heads or hex heads, and there's no chance of them rounding out or anything, which I've had with quite a few of the cheaper tools I've tried. So all these little black spaces, they're all the same. And we can get that servo out. So let's try for size. See how we're looking. So that looks like it's going to be more than happy to sit in there. So the only real fiddly bit is getting the first screw in out of these. So if you line it up, drop one of the screws through. and once you've got the thread started you can drop the other ones in. Now what I usually find best to do with servos is don't tighten them down completely till you've got all four in. So if you get them so they're pretty close, but so you've still got a little bit of movement in it, and then should you need to, you can move it around a little. So we get them so they're almost tight. So you've just got a little bit of play. We've definitely got enough servo wire. So now we want this next one in. Check, make sure that's not going to catch anywhere. And as a rule, servos should be pretty much the same size, but I have had some servos that are ever so slightly different, and it does make it awkward to fit them in certain vehicles. But no, it doesn't look like that's catching. They're not hitting the bottom of the chassis, which is nice. So let's get the servo screws in for this one. So now we've got the last one to get in. They're actually quite nice looking servos, these as well. For the price, the spec and everything, if they both work and they don't just go up in smoke as soon as I try and use them, I think they're going to be quite a cost-effective, powerful little servo to use. Now what I do try and do on these is, I'm not sure how good it'll pick it up on camera, but try and get them pretty central so they're not catching on anywhere, but it don't really matter. And then you want to make sure that your steering servo doesn't run the side of your central drive gear. Yeah, you don't want to be routing this wire down that side so it's running near your spur gear. Make sure it's running away from it. And then we have got a little tiny grommet down here that we can just pop the wires through. And then you can just have your excess wire in your receiver box rather than it flailing around all over under the car. Now if I just bring it down here, bring the camera down a little, and you can see I've brought that wire round that side. So if you are running a LiPo battery under there, one of the stick packs, you're not going to be rubbing on the cable. And then you can just pull these. You don't want them to be, you don't want to pull these so they're completely tight. You want a tiny bit of play, so it's not as the chassis flexes or anything, it's not pulling the wires out. Let's make sure they're all lined up, and then we can start getting some screws back in. The two rear ones, so the ones that are going down onto the battery box, for some reason they're sort of real fine thread that you'd find screwing into metal, but can't see any metal in there, it just looks like plastic. But again, same as when you're fastening the servos in, I find it easier to just put these in, but don't tighten them all the way down until you get all the rest of the screws in. And then the rest of the screws that go into the posts are coarse thread. Won't mind looking in to see if I can get some of the posts. I think these are plastic. I'd like to get some metal ones on there, because what I have noticed is if you have the brake so it's pulling on quite hard, you can see this twist. Does help just to be able to get your finger through onto the post. You can hold it, stop it spinning, and don't go crazy tight on these back ones because they are fine thread into plastic. So what we should have here is throttle on 2 and steering on 1. And your negative wire will be the one that goes to the back on this receiver, I believe. Yep. And you can tuck the wires away nice and neat. Just make sure they're not going to get trapped as you screw the cover down onto the battery box and receiver box. You don't want to be pinching any wires around the side. I believe the screws that go into this are fine thread as well, so you don't want to be tightening these up too much. Now, anybody that's curious, that wire I have for the lap monitor transponder, and that I have out so I can just plug a cable in and charge it. So I'll just keep that one stuck out the side of the battery box, purely just for convenience. I don't go driving it through water or anything, so I'm not really bothered about the battery box being waterproof or not. And you don't have to tighten these screws down too hard because they are really fine thread. So let's see if we can get these centered before we put the steering arms on.
Welcome to Noble.
So steering's working and throttle's working. So let's get them centered on the Noble first.
Center point. Center point.
So what you can do if you've got a little bit of play on your servos, so if you set it to dead center and then set your wheel straight, then if you do find it's a tiny bit out, you have got a little bit of play. So by moving that, you can actually move where the arm is. Just helps you get it dead center. You can also trim it with that, and you can trim it with those. So let's see if it wants reversing. That and the end stops don't look too bad on that. Just wants the end point adjusting right, because that's just going a bit too far. Let's find something to take the weight off at front of the car. Yeah, that looks quite a nice servo. So let's get the throttle set up. Basically, all I'm looking for is for it just to be compressing this. I think we just need to change the center point slightly on the throttle. Let's see. I've got a little bit of play. See what I've got sub trim set to. Looks like it's going to be close enough, so I get this tightened up. Yeah, they seem quite nice. Right, so get the screws back in the servos. Always worth checking that you've not accidentally put a screw that's too long in servo, so as you tighten it down, if you just keep flicking it, but yeah, so they're just running off 6 volt initially. That's a lot stronger than the stock servos were. So we can drop that one down, put the last screw back in. We want the air filter back on. That could definitely do with a wash, state of that. In fact, I think I've got a new outer cover kicking around somewhere, but I don't think we'll be running this for a while with weather we've got at the moment. I always find this screw a bit awkward. I don't know why. Just doesn't seem to want to start, but then when it starts, it goes on fine. I've got to get a tie wrap on the bottom of the air filter again, but yeah, we're just about done. So I mean, that's the steering. That, to say that's on 6 volt, that does seem a lot more responsive, and the throttle's nice and quick. Throttle and brake. So yeah, that's the Hobao Hyper VS Nitro with the JX, I think they are HV7232MG. I'll put a picture-in-picture of the specs and all as I'm going through video, so you can see exactly what the performance of them is at the set voltages. But yeah, thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like and subscribe, don't forget to hit the notification bell, and we'll see you again in the next one.